All right, thanks everyone for coming. The goal of here is to have an interactive discussion about the threat landscape, what's going on. So we don't have any slides. I hope that doesn't make you sad and cry. They put this one up because they have something that's our name. I'll start with a quick introduction. Just the name and title, and then we'll give a couple minute just discussion and then open it up. So I'm Steve House. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product Management. I have been at Zscaler almost 7 years. I was the VP of Product Management for Blue Coat Systems. Prior to this, I spent 7 years at Blue Coat. I got there when they acquired a company called Packeteer. I ran the product management team for Packeteer, and I spent 6 years there. So I own everything product, what the engineering team builds and delivers. I also have the documentation team, the program management team, and the pricing and packaging teams.
Yeah, and I'm Deepan Desai. I'm the global CISO here. I have two groups reporting into me. One is responsible for product security, and then the other one is ThreatLabz, which tracks threat intelligence and adds coverage to the cloud. I've been with Zscaler for 1 year more than Steve, so 8 years now. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, and to kick it off, I thought maybe I'll just spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about product thoughts around security, and then we'll let Deepan do the same around the threat research side. So we're always trying to make security of our products better. That's obvious. We've got lots of features coming out every release. We've got a ZIA feature going into beta on ML-based phishing detection. We've already got a couple other ways to do phishing detection, but we added an ML-based one. On the ZPA side, you may have seen in the keynotes talking about the ability to do scanning of content for OS top 10, like SQL injection, cross-site scripting. That's gone into the product right now. On the ZPA side, we launched products around doing not just Zscaler for users, but also Zscaler for workloads, and going forward, Zscaler for things. So that's about securing more parts of the organization. But if we look a little bit forward, where I would say one of our big investment areas is really thinking more holistically around risk. Not only in the context of, say, one product line like ZIA, where in this release, we're going into beta next week. We've got a new risk assessment in there. We have policy attributes based on a user's risk score, which we've had a risk score in there for a while, but instead of being updated once a day, it's updated continuously, and it's now a risk attribute, or it's a policy attribute, where you could say if someone's risk is higher than X, maybe you don't allow access or you step up auth. And you combine that with the new posture checks, which we also have. So do we trust the device they're coming from, and do we trust that user themselves? Are they behaving right? Now that's a policy. You'll see things like that on ZPA as well, but we're also investing in a more holistic risk approach where the products communicate with each other. So maybe if somebody makes a command and control call out through ZIA, that informs what ZPA does. That user now has an elevated risk. The rest of the Zscaler portfolio should understand that and maybe adjust policy and say, you know what, we're going to stop access to our crown jewel applications till they do a multi-factor auth or something like that. So that idea that everything we do should be interconnected and not be individual products is really important, and you're already seeing that in the messaging around Zscaler for users, which is moving away from ZIA, ZPA, ZDX. It's more Zscaler for users, Zscaler for workloads, Zscaler for the Internet of Things.
Yeah, and if I may add from the threat landscape perspective, like a lot of the stuff that Steve spoke about, I mean, we're trying to address 3 major buckets, and this is what we're seeing post-pandemic, even in the hybrid work environment we are in now, which is probably going to stay for long. There are 3 areas where a lot of the adversaries are honing in and adding more and more tactics, right? The first bucket is they continue to target our users, employees, right? That's where the spear phishing attacks and targeting the endpoint using either social engineering or even weaponizing the payloads with newly discovered vulnerabilities, right? So that's where they're going after the user. The second area is where we're seeing them go after your exposed assets. I'm an adversary trying to plan an attack against company A. My recon stage is, what do I know about this company from outside, right? So doing that external attack exposure piece, and then going after the assets that are being exposed. One stat that I'll share is my team tracks and collaborates with regional certs, VPNs, not to bash that, but they were number one targeted technologies by more than a dozen APT groups over the last year. Right? So anything that is exposed to the internet, attack surface, threat actors definitely are going after that. That's the second bucket. And the third bucket is where public cloud, there is significant focus over there. I'll mention a couple vectors that we have seen in case of ransomware attack as well as an info stealer attack as well, where we're looking for, hey, do I see any open RDP port or SMB port? Misconfigurations, low-hanging fruit, but that can lead to significantly large-scale data breaches as well. But once they are inside the environment, then the playbook is almost similar. And they gain entry to that first asset, whether it's the end user, server, or public cloud environment. They will try to move laterally, gain network foothold, right? Try to recon your entire environment from inside. And then they will come to the call to action stage where they're trying to steal data, they're trying to hit with ransomware, or they may be just sitting dormant, trying to observe what's going on in the environment, right? But the TTP remains the same. The entry vectors, as I classified, user, exposed assets, public cloud infrastructure. That's where we're seeing a lot of campaigns from some of the more sophisticated actors. So, I mean, for the discussion today, what we were thinking of, maybe I can bring up a few areas where I'm sure all of you guys dealt with as well in terms of response, like maybe supply chain attacks, ransomware, insider threats, and maybe we can have some discussion if you guys have questions or if you guys want to comment on that. Does that sound like a good plan or yeah? Okay, awesome. So maybe start with a supply chain attack, and we could even pick something like SolarWinds Orion, which everyone would have gotten a lot of content overload last year, right? But something like that were to happen, what can we do to be in a better state, right? In terms of detecting it and responding to it quickly. Anyone wants to take a stab at that? Here, maybe I'll go first, and then we can open it up, right? So, I had several discussions back then. Obviously, my team was actively involved. We weren't using Orion, but our goal is obviously to figure out what the exposure was. We were collaborating with regional certs as well to figure out what all things were being targeted after they were in. Mandiant did a great job of sharing a bunch of stuff that they already discovered as far as TTPs were concerned, but many organizations were struggling. So here is what I looked at in terms of our organization's exposure. Again, we didn't have Orion, but say if we're dependent on some other application, if a malicious update were to come in, what is my visibility? When will my team know something like this did happen, right? So any vendor that claimed that they can block that first malicious update that came in from the compromised Orion update server infrastructure is lying, because it was all encrypted, it was all signed, they literally were inside the code base. But once that update landed on the server, there were a lot of telltale signs, which even the existing Zscaler customers with some of the controls that they had were successful in flagging. So number one thing it did was it tried to communicate to a domain that was registered, not in last 30 days, it was 6 months ago, but it was not categorized. It was not a legitimate known domain. So that backdoor connected to that from Orion, which is a critical server infrastructure, if you were to think about it. Many of those 1,000 organizations that got hit allowed that connection to happen. So that's number one, right? So number one is I would not want my critical environment to be talking outside. So it should be blocked. But when it tries to do that, I need to get that SOC alert so that my team is on top of that, right? So that's number one. Number two, if it talks to a destination which is trusted, and I've allowed it to communicate to that. Bad stuff gets in, and now that server is trying to, or the threat actor is trying to move from that server within my environment. What is the visibility that I have? So east-west traffic is where I'm pointing to now. And that's where we're drinking from the fire hose, so we're using our own product, which is application identity-based segmentation. That's a workload segmentation piece, where if process A on server A is known to talk to process B on server B, and suddenly it starts talking to 10 other servers, 10 other processes, makes any other outbound connectivity, it gets flagged, team gets notified, we take action. So again, we're trying to reduce that blast radius. I'm sure you've heard that word in the keynotes, you're going to hear more of that, but goal is contain that infection, that malicious update to that one asset, and then respond to it. So those are the two, I wouldn't call them basic, because one of them does require some deployment, but the first one is really basic, like don't let your critical infrastructure talk to arbitrary destinations on the internet. And that's where many of the customers were using ZIA to block that outbound activity. Anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll go back to your original question, like, how do you approach it? We've been having this conversation more around trying to get a better understanding of what all the various third-party products in our environment do, and if they. So we ran into a scenario 2 years ago. We had one payroll processor kicking out a bunch of checks, and they got hacked. They got ransomware, and they went down. Therefore, then they couldn't provide us the service to dish out paychecks. So it got us now all of a sudden sitting down and thinking about, like, well, where should we build in redundancy for our business pipeline? And it could be whether or not it's compromising our environment due to, like, SolarWinds Orion, or whether it's just critical apps. And a lot of that just comes down to full sector one. You know all the apps in your environment, like, you know what they do, you understand what redundancies are in place. I was at a CIO conference talking about, they had like a time clock thing that they didn't even really use, but it was in a kind of a critical juncture in their network. So when it went down, it broke all this other downstream stuff they didn't do, and it got them thinking about how all that stuff fits. But it's not really a question as far as the Orion stuff. But yeah, that's the same.
Great point. No, agreed.
And we've realized real fast that we don't understand crap about a lot of the third-party applications in the environment.
Yeah.
And even if you do let them talk out to the internet, you should probably understand where are they talking and then lock it down to just that. Because a lot of them do have a legitimate reason to reach out to 5 or 10 places on the internet. But anything new should be a red flag and blocked by default. And the other thing is...
Yeah, I was just going to say, we did that. You mentioned the uncategorized. We block all uncategorized websites. Our user tries to go to one and say, hey, like, we don't really know this. Are you sure you want to go here?
Caution, yeah.
Through. But if it's like an automated call out, it would be blocked.
Perfect. No, that's ideal.
It's not getting prompted. It's not
And a lot of people have policies by location. If your servers are in a defined location, this VPC or this subnet of your data center, they should be like news sites and sports sites and gambling sites. Like, why would a server need to go out to CNN or whatever? It's like you can be a much stricter set of policies on where your applications are going than your users, right? You want to be somewhat, user-centric and friendly, and depending on the vertical you're in, some are more strict about it than others. But in general, you want to let people do things on the internet. But the servers, they should only be going to a few places. Like the ones who do it right, I think, do a complete allow list and then block everything else, a default deny from the servers, right? I've actually seen some banks that try to do that on the user side, and I don't recommend that at all. But on the servers, I do.
Yeah.
This was a nation state.
This was a nation state, yeah.
I think one little bit piece of comfort there was that we learned that, hey, this was targeted specifically for some organization, even though everybody with the infected version of Orion had it.
Yeah.
So there was nothing that they wanted from us.
Correct.
You weren't the target.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
we rolled into response. And like, it looks like the back door was there, and it was there for September. Or
Yeah.
we deployed the update, and they're like, it doesn't look like anything moved. The back door was open, but nobody went. So
Yeah, it didn't activate for everyone. You're right, exactly. But
so
yeah.
we were on that same list, but I still wonder if the fact that you're on one of those 1,000 company lists it later. It was about 3 months later I got a ransomware. Not to say that they're correlated, but I feel like they put us on a list that maybe we don't have the right practices.
Interesting.
No, it's like if you're using SolarWinds, like as he said, like the attack is so like it was signed code.
It was signed code.
SolarWinds,
Yeah.
like, this was not. We want to check it.
We allowed the outbound traffic though.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So the
Because we
command
ended
control.
up on a DNS list of like 250 people that
that's
showed
fair.
that they were good.
Like that puts you on a list. Like, well, command and control would work.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and honestly, one of the points you made and that you made, but the end party dependency, like the nth party dependency. I mean, even if your security posture is super strong, if you're dependent on that third party, I mean, we're seeing as part of our ransomware tracking effort, what we're starting to see is if they can't pop your environment, they will go after the parties that you depend on. And in the recent report, we documented a case where Qantas Computer, if I'm saying that correctly, there was a vendor that was targeted, and that vendor, not maybe well known to some, but Apple's Blueprint, Apple's MacBook Blueprint, HP, Asus, all of these big vendors had some tie-up with that, right? And suddenly, the threat actor was able to exfiltrate all of the data from this guy, and now they're going after Apple, demanding ransom, right? So attacking your supply chain, even indirectly, can be lethal, especially in case of ransomware attacks. So I kind of pivoted from supply chain to ransom, but a lot of those things are converging together. It is definitely a scenario where segmentation and zero trust significantly helps out.
That's one of the things that really concerns me. I work at NCR. We're a very international company. I can't count how many times the architecture team has come to me and said, "Hey, we need an exception because X." I mean, there's regional requirements that we wind up getting into. Pick on any specific country, but South America, Eastern Europe, Asia will say, "Hey, you have to use this software to file bills of lading or do tax update, whatever it is." You are forced into that one piece of software. I can't count how many times they'll say, "Oh yeah, we don't support encryption." Yeah, the only way you can do it is FTP. Here's your user ID and password. You can't change it. I mean, I can't count how many times we get into those kind of situations. Or you gotta do this over the web, and we don't have SSL turned on our web server.
Right.
HTTP. And there's no there's no safety valve. There's no way to go and argue your case because it's a government agency and in this other country you've got no leverage.
Right.
Them to do something. That I think creates a lot of risk for us. I worry about things getting back into us, but probably more likely scenario is what we're talking about, that they get compromised. Whatever data we're sending to
Exactly.
them, is now public and available for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fair, but if it's
I get where you're going.
Yeah.
It's still a PR nightmare when they say, "Well, that we got, yeah." That becomes the PR nightmare
Right.
to solve. Yeah. But I mean, I definitely see that. I see like a common thread in the conversation for and back to vendor and with the conversation what their security requirements are, whether you can audit, whether you have the right to audit.
How far downstream do you go? Like we're talking about this with SOX. We're looking at SOC reports for SOX requirements. And it's like, how far down the rabbit hole do I go? It's like, oh, we're dependent on this vendor, dependent on this vendor, dependent on that vendor. It's like, so it's like, what about
The dependent on you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
No,
Yeah.
Sorry, a little off topic.
No, that's perfect.
No, we're on threat landscape. That's a very large
It
the threat landscape.
it is.
We use SOC reports to start a conversation. Even then, like, we're still going.
Yeah.
Not like we're, all right, we're gonna go all your business.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll share what we are doing, right? So we do manage third-party vendors as well. SOC report. There are a lot of those checklist one. We do that as well as part of the legal requirement. But what I've done with the team is we've basically created tiers depending on the level of information that they're going to have access to, right? There are different tiers. If you're in this tier, I need to see your pen test report. If you don't have one, let me do something about it as well, right? So give me permission. So that does help me get a little bit more conviction about the security state. I know many vendors use BitSight. I absolutely hate that because that's a very vague way of measuring security. But beyond that, having that periodic check-ins, because one thing that we realized was you did all your checks when you onboarded the vendor. 6 months down the line, they had an incident. They didn't talk about it. 6 months later, it got acquired by someone else, and suddenly their posture went from here to here. So then having the requirements and then having a frequency of checks for those tiers, again, very important point.
That's what I like BitSight for. Like BitSight, if they get popped, their score drops, and if you've got alerts kicking off, like, hey, this tier 1 vendor just went from 760 to 610. Like, go give them a call. They're like, what happened? Like,
Yeah, there are pros and cons over there, but yes.
I agree, BitSight is not an end-all, be-all, but it's
Right.
a data point.
Yeah, it's a data point.
If you don't have team size, be like, all right, we've got 100 vendors we track, but let's call them. We've hit our 1-year anniversary. Let's get updated SOC reports.
All the resources they get
We
to
just
spend on
don't-
that,
yeah,
and what
we
you
just
actually
do
get
it.
back from it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You feel better? I know it's all bad. I thought it was all bad. Now I know it.
Yeah. I think one more point I caught from you was maybe we are on a list of that future ransomware attack. That's actually something that we saw a group doing. I don't know. I'm sure you guys heard of the Aon insurance company getting hit as well, right? And I'm not trying to give you bad news over there, but what we do is as part of a tracking effort, we monitor the chatter on these ransomware operator side. We monitor the payment sites as well that they set up, the Tor Onion sites, and we look at how many victims are actually engaging with the operator. So in case of Aon, they actually pulled the list of top organizations with large cyber insurance. Yeah, exactly. So that's a prioritized list that they were able to get, and they were actually making fun of it in that chatter that we were able to capture. Like, hey, we have a list of our prime targets now that we're going to go after. So that does definitely get leveraged by the ransomware operator to prioritize.
Like you got 50 million insurance. We're going to ask for 60. We'll negotiate down to 48, and we know you can pay.
They negotiate 75% down, and if you do your based on
Good to know.
yeah, 75% down is the where people really.
Or if I don't have insurance, I can get like the cash discount.
Yeah, like the doctor's bill when you don't have it's cheaper.
Yeah, that's crazy. But on the ransomware threat landscape side, I mean, does anyone want to comment on
I got one thing we went through. So we've got an incident response retainer. CrowdStrike, ransomware was a big hot topic. We got our retainer a couple of years ago, and they were like, we don't negotiate ransomware. You need to go to a vendor and probably get a $0 retainer. And it makes sense. They're like publicly traded companies. We don't negotiate with terrorists. It doesn't look good in the SEC. So
right?
I'm like, yeah, that's fair. So they go to private companies like Muse,
Right.
KIDU.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we've got partnerships with the FBI. We can negotiate down. We know whether or not your flavor of ransomware is one that we've got keys for, that kind of stuff. But a lot of people I've talked to didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, ransomware negotiation. There are
They
companies.
explained it like we're CrowdStrike. Yeah, we're great at incident response. We're publicly traded. We do not negotiate
And that's how I came up with that 75%, because when we monitor the victim chatter, it's mostly those companies that gets hired to perform this negotiation, and they know how low they can get a certain operator to.
You're selling the pickaxe and shovels in the gold rush right
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I think on the ransomware side, one other note I'll mention based on the playbooks that we're seeing, right? I mean, many of these, people say that, hey, with so much government and law enforcement focus, it should die down, but we're not seeing that. We're actually seeing 8 out of 11 top families, they now have a ransomware as a service framework. So it's very easy for someone else to come in, pick it up, launch their campaign and monetize, right? So that it's going to keep multiplying because of that. The other thing we're seeing is they keep rebranding. So Revil gets cracked down because they attacked something, or what was that? The Conti, dark matter was the one, I think, that hit Colonial Pipeline. I mean, a lot of government crackdown, they banned the name of the organization. Now the victims can't pay money to them as well. So they come back, change the name, and then again. Yeah, we've seen like 6 to 8 different gangs in just last 6 months come back with newer name. And it's exact same code base, same tactics, just different name. Yeah, all right, see you guys. Are we on time? Oh yeah. It's already 3:30. Yes.
I think that's when we're supposed to end, right?
I think there is a keynote. That was at. Yeah, but I had a few more discussion points, but we can continue later.
It says here you guys are going to do the song and dance number.
I was going to bring up insider threats.
They didn't put that in mine.
I'm going to do one on the main stage tomorrow morning, but yeah.
A dance? Nice.
We expect to see it now.
We're ready.
Just kidding.
Oh yeah, that was quick. Hopefully that was interesting, and we'll both be here for another day if you want to continue this offline.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up some good points. Thank you.
But I guess we keep talking, right? Yeah.
Oh, we're getting kicked out. Is that what's happening? Okay.
No, somebody else is coming in. So you guys stay here.
That's what I meant. Like me and you are getting kicked out.
Who is the next speaker?
I don't know. I'm gonna.
Joe, Brian Green, John Graham, Michael Strauss.
Oh, I saw
Oh,
Brian.
that's the field CISO team, and okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we can keep talking for a minute since they're not here. Oh, Jay came in.
Hey, Jay.
You want to say hello? We just wrapped up, but
Yeah.
the next speaker's not here yet, so
Had
we're
some
going to keep going.
good discussion on supply chain attacks, ransomware, insider threats. Well, that we couldn't get to that, but yeah. That was my third topic.